Well, here we are with Autumn Defense. We have John Stirratt and Pat Sansone. Thanks, guys, for coming. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Frank.
We've got a lot to cover today. I'm pretty excited about this interview for a multitude of reasons. So let's start off with some basic background of Autumn Defense. Now, from what I understand, you guys met back at University of Mississippi. Is that correct?
No, it was kind of more in the southeastern music scene, I think, late 80s, and I don't think Pat had any really, I don't know if Pat ever lived in Oxford or went to university. I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but we were in bands that were contemporaries, and I think he was friendly with my sister, and we got to know each other in New Orleans later on, in the late 90s, I guess.
Anybody that played music in Mississippi in the late 80s pretty much knew everybody else that played music there.
So you guys just were in circles, knew each other?
I was based in Hattiesburg, Mississippi for a while, and John and his sister were in Oxford before he was in Uncle Tupelo.
Right.
So yeah, there were a lot of musicians that I still know and keep in touch. Will Kimbrough, somebody I still know from that time.
Had him in our show earlier. What was the genesis then? What was the first foray into what is now known as Autumn Defense?
Well, I remember Pat was working in a studio called Magazine Sound in uptown New Orleans, and I remember just as we were hanging out, we just had the idea to maybe he would help arrange and record some tunes that I had, and that kind of became the beginning of the first Autumn Defense album.
And that's been this is the one we're going to be talking about today. It's going to be your third. The first one was more of an EP, right?
Well, I guess we have 3 full lengths and an EP. The first one was a full length, and that was. Came out in early 2001.
There's a lot of talk and a lot written about Autumn Defense as far as this really hard to pin down, almost indefinable sound, but they always bring up this late 60s, early 70s, California, Zombies, Birds type pop, right? What's the story behind that? Obviously it's a passion of both, right? You come from that background as far as what you grew up on, so explain the sound and why it defines you.
Well, I think when we first started making music together, it was through a love of music of that type. I mean, we realized that we were listening to a lot of the same records, like right around the same time. You mentioned Zombies, things like Odyssey and Oracle.
Right.
Love Forever Changes and some Scott Walker and just a lot of music that has over the last few years really kind of come back up into the consciousness.
And how do you define that? We're obviously against the labeling, but everything I've been reading about this, and every time I've been trying to articulate this myself, it's hard to. How do you explain that type of music without making it sound like it's insignificant or twee?
I don't know. I think pop music that has a certain gentleness, but also a depth, and I think the orchestral nature of a lot of the arrangements of those records is what we really responded to.
Right.
Yeah, there's a total sophistication that that sort of subverts any of that. I mean, it's not music for everyone. Obviously, it's like, I think a certain sensitivity might be required, for some of it, but it's if anything, I think it's more substantive, in so many ways.
Well, there's on that point, there's something I want to talk about too, is because there is well, I've noticed anyway, amongst the hipster crowd, there's a backlash against any band out there that actually tries to create pretty or almost popish type music, right? If it's something that's enjoyable to listen to, right out of the gate, it can't be cool, right? You've sold out in some fashion. I mean,
I don't know. I think there's been a real shift in that.
Yeah,
in the last,
give me some examples of some
couple of years.
The Decemberists that would be an example of a shift in that, which whatever. I mean, in terms of a more mass appeal, or at least some people that, but that they also have this sort of literary, this sort of literary angle, but. I mean, people have been saying that for a long time, and frankly, going up against like SST listeners, I mean, that was a much tougher group than what you have now, so bring it on as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, there's a lot of 20-somethings now that are out there, you know, listening to Nick Drake and
Right.
you know, and rediscovering all the, you know, all these beautiful English folk records. And
It's interesting to see too, because some of the bands that obviously have influenced you so much, I happen to have a certain affinity to them growing up in the '70s as well. But you know, being a music snob and fairly condescending to friends at times, I would love these tunes and these bands, but I would call them guilty pleasures. I couldn't come right out and say that these are good songs, these are good tunes. So
I remember when there was like this attitude about the Beach Boys that was like that. It
It's
was
still
amazing. It was like during the grunge era,
Absolutely.
like people shooting down Pet Sounds and just what I mean, people that I really respected. I mean, that weren't even like hard rockers. It never really made sense. I think.
Well, I think it goes back to if it's got beautiful melodies, right, and it's a beautiful song that doesn't have this hard edge, it can't be considered art, right?
Yeah.
I disagree.
That's right.
Well, obviously that's why we're here too, and that's why we're here to talk and promote about this, because it's exciting and it gives a lot of people who we think ordinarily wouldn't be exposed to this type of thing a chance to see that there's really decent, good, innovative music out there.